Do you ever think about those Christmas meals Black mothers made that 1960s kids begged for? The ones that made the day feel magical? For those families, these Christmas meals turned simple ingredients into the joy kids counted down for all year. What part of that magic have we let fade? Brown sugar ham glaze was the kind of Christmas magic children could smell from the porch before they even stepped inside. A scent so sweet and warm it felt like the holiday had finally arrived. Mothers made the glaze from pantry ingredients they trusted, stirring brown sugar, butter, cinnamon, and a little mustard until it bubbled into a thick, glossy syrup. When it coated the ham, it melted into every crease and crack, turning the surface sticky and caramel-colored. Children hovered nearby, pretending to help, but really waiting for the chance to sneak a fingertip across the edge of the pan when no one was looking. The glaze tasted like deep sweetness mixed with spice, a flavor that lived somewhere between candy and tradition. Even families who could not afford a big ham sometimes bought a single slice just so they could have the glaze, because the glaze alone felt like a whole celebration. It was the part of Christmas dinner children talked about the most, the flavor they waited 12 long months for, and the one they compared every other holiday dish to. In many homes, the glaze was made the exact same way every year, passed down quietly through memory, not written recipes. Brown sugar ham glaze tasted like warmth, celebration, and the promise that Christmas had truly begun. Sweet potato pie was the crown of the Christmas table, the dessert children begged for long before dinner was even served. Mothers boiled the sweet potatoes until they softened, then mashed them with butter, evaporated milk, sugar, eggs, and warm spices that filled the house with the smell of holidays. The filling turned silky and golden as they poured it into handmade crusts, rolled thin and pressed into the pie dish with practiced fingers. While the pies baked, the entire kitchen transformed, the air turning thick with cinnamon and nutmeg, making children circle the oven like hungry little satellites. When the pies finally emerged, the tops had a gentle sheen, and the centers jiggled just enough to promise the perfect texture. Children always begged for a slice before dinner, and mothers always said no with a smile because part of the joy was waiting. The flavor was warm, creamy, familiar, and impossibly comforting. The kind of sweetness that felt like it came from the soul, not just the kitchen. Sweet potato pie tasted like tradition, pride, and the pure excitement of Christmas in a single bite. Baked macaroni and cheese with evaporated milk was the rich, creamy holiday version that families saved for Christmas because it took more ingredients, more time, and more love than the everyday stovetop version. Mothers boiled the macaroni until it was tender, then mixed it with shredded cheese, butter, eggs, and evaporated milk that gave the dish its signature richness. When it baked in the oven, the top browned just enough to form a crispy layer children fought over, while the inside stayed soft, cheesy, and comforting. The smell alone made the table feel festive, a deep, savory aroma that told everyone Christmas dinner was almost ready. Children scooped big spoonfuls onto their plates, watching the cheese stretch in long, soft strands that made the dish feel luxurious even when budgets were tight. This was a dish built from care, the kind of food mothers made because they knew the holiday needed something special, even if they had to stretch ingredients to make it happen. Every family had their own version, but every version made children close their eyes and smile at the first bite. Macaroni and cheese with evaporated milk tasted like celebration, tradition, and a holiday table made complete. Collard greens with smoked turkey tails were the Christmas pot that simmered for hours, filling the entire house with a smell so familiar and comforting that children knew exactly what day it was before anyone said a word. Mothers washed the greens leaf by leaf, removing stems and tearing them into pieces so tender they practically melted after cooking. The smoked turkey tails went into the pot first, releasing their flavor slowly into the broth until the kitchen filled with that unmistakable smoky scent. When the greens finally joined, they simmered until silky and rich, soaking up every bit of seasoning. Children dipped bread into the potlikker when mothers were not looking, because the broth tasted just as good as the greens. This dish felt like home, history, and holiday all at once. No matter how tight the budget was, collard greens with smoked turkey tails made the table feel whole, reminding families that Christmas was about flavor, family, and tradition shared across generations. Collard greens tasted like warmth, love, and the comfort of knowing good food would always bring people together. Cornbread dressing with giblets was the heart of the Christmas table, a dish that required time, patience, and the kind of cooking skill mothers carried without ever needing a recipe book. The cornbread was baked the day before, then crumbled by hand until it formed the perfect base. Giblets were boiled and chopped finely, added for richness and tradition. Mothers mixed everything with onions, celery, broth, and spices until the dressing reached a consistency somewhere between soft and firm. When it baked, the top browned beautifully while the inside stayed moist and savory. Children always asked for extra scoops because no holiday plate felt complete without it. Cornbread dressing tasted like history, effort, and the deep comfort of a dish made entirely from scratch. Pineapple glazed ham slices were a festive touch. Black families used to make Christmas feel luxurious even when the budget was slim. A single ham slice could feed several children when dressed with pineapple rounds cooked in brown sugar and pan drippings, stretching what little meat the family had. The fruit caramelized on top, turning golden and glossy as its juices melted into the salty ham below. Children loved the mix of sweet and salty, the syrup dripping down the edges of the ham like liquid gold, making every plate look special. Some mothers even saved the pineapple juice from the can to make sure nothing went to waste. Pineapple glaze turned a simple slice of meat into something that looked like it belonged on a holiday magazine cover, even though it came from thrift and creativity. It tasted like celebration made from care, resourcefulness, and the determination to make Christmas feel full no matter what the pantry looked like. Candied yams cooked in brown sugar were the dish children ran to first, the sweet side that tasted like warm caramel and childhood joy. Mothers sliced the yams thick and simmered them with butter, sugar, and cinnamon until the syrup turned deep and sticky, coating each piece like glossy amber. The smell drifted through the house like a promise of the holiday to come, wrapping everything in warmth. Every bite was tender, sweet, and rich enough to feel like dessert before dessert, the flavor sinking into the soft flesh of the yams. Children often tried to sneak a piece straight from the pan, burning their tongues but smiling anyway. This dish tasted like Christmas comfort, tradition, and sweetness, wrapped in the memory of families who made magic from simple ingredients. Butter rolls baked in sweet syrup were the hidden treasure of Southern Christmas tables, a dish that blurred the line between dessert and bread. Mothers rolled the dough into soft spirals, placed them in a pan, and poured a warm mix of milk, butter, and sugar over the top, letting it settle into every gap. As they baked, the syrup thickened into something creamy sweet and almost custard-like, coating every corner. Children hovered near the oven, unable to wait, their eyes following the bubbling edges. When the rolls came out piping hot, they tore apart in soft, tender layers that melted on the tongue. Butter rolls tasted like sweetness, softness, and pure Christmas comfort. The kind of treat made with hands that understood how to turn simple ingredients into unforgettable joy. Fried chicken. Christmas platters appeared in homes where a full turkey or ham was too expensive, proving that Christmas was about flavor, not price tags. Mothers seasoned each piece carefully, using spices they knew by heart, fried them until perfectly crisp, and served them on big platters that vanished in minutes. Children grabbed legs and wings with both hands, laughing through every crunchy bite as steam rose from the fresh pieces. The smell of seasoned chicken drifting through the house made the whole day feel like a celebration. For many families, fried chicken was the centerpiece they could count on, a dish that felt festive no matter the circumstances. Fried chicken at Christmas tasted like joy, pride, and the power of skill and love to create a holiday feast from whatever was available. Stewed apples with cinnamon were the gentle sweet side that made the entire table smell like Christmas morning. Mothers cooked the apples until they softened, letting butter, sugar, and spices turn them into something warm, tender, and spoon-ready. The scent filled every corner of the house, drifting from the kitchen to the living room, and wrapping the whole family in comfort. Children loved them because they tasted like dessert even before dessert was served, soft enough to melt on the tongue and sweet enough to feel special. Some mothers added a splash of lemon, some added nutmeg, but every version felt like warmth in a bowl. Stewed apples tasted like Christmas comfort home and the quiet sweetness that made the holiday feel whole. Banana pudding with wafers was the chilled Christmas treasure children could barely wait for, especially when they knew it had been sitting in the fridge all night, getting better by the hour. Mothers layered vanilla wafers, sliced bananas, and warm homemade pudding in deep glass dishes, each layer sinking just slightly as the wafers softened into cake-like sweetness. The bowl went into the refrigerator covered tightly, and from that moment on, children opened the fridge door every 20 minutes just to look. By the next day, the pudding had turned silky, the bananas had sweetened, and the wafers had transformed into soft, creamy layers that tasted like pure comfort. When the dish was lifted out for Christmas dinner, everyone leaned in closer, waiting for the spoon to reveal that first perfect scoop. The smell alone, warm vanilla and banana, felt like a holiday hug. It was the dessert that never lasted long because children asked for seconds before their plates even touched the table. Banana pudding tasted like patience rewarded, Christmas excitement, and the magic of a dessert that only got better overnight. Oven-baked barbecue turkey wings were the holiday main dish mothers perfected when whole turkeys were too expensive, but flavor was non-negotiable. The wings were seasoned with spices, rubbed down with sauce, and baked low and slow until the skin turned sticky, glossy, and rich with smoky sweetness. As they cooked, the house filled with a smell so good children wandered into the kitchen pretending they needed water just to get a peek. When the wings finally came out, the meat slid easily from the bone, tender and full of holiday warmth. Mothers made them because they stretched far, fed everyone, and tasted like a celebration even on a tight budget. Barbecue turkey wings tasted like creativity, comfort, and Christmas made possible through skill and love. Hoppin John Holiday Bowl was the hearty dish that brought luck, warmth, and full bellies to the Christmas table. Mothers simmered black-eyed peas slowly with onions, garlic, spices, and a bit of pork or smoked meat to deepen the flavor, letting the pot bubble quietly as the house filled with a smell everyone recognized. When the peas turned tender, they were ladled over soft white rice, creating a bowl that was simple but deeply satisfying, the kind of meal that wrapped itself around you. Children loved mixing the rice and peas together, letting every bite taste smoky, earthy, and comforting as the broth soaked into the grains. Mothers made it because it fed many people for very little and carried a tradition rooted in hope for the coming year, a reminder that blessings often began in the kitchen. A bowl of Hoppin John tasted like heritage blessing and a warm moment shared with the whole family, the type of dish that felt like both nourishment and promise. Hot water cornbread fried in cast iron was the Christmas side that disappeared faster than anything else on the table. Mothers mixed cornmeal, hot water, salt, and a touch of oil until the dough came together, then shaped it gently by hand with the kind of practiced ease that only came from years of doing it. The patties hissed the moment they hit the hot skillet, frying into golden rounds with crisp edges and soft centers that made mouths water instantly. Children hovered as the cornbread browned, praying the first batch would be theirs and watching every flip like it was a holiday performance. These little cakes tasted buttery and warm, even without butter, perfect for dipping into greens gravy or anything else that needed a little extra comfort. Hot water cornbread tasted like tradition simplicity and holiday comfort made in minutes, carrying the kind of love that only came from hands that cooked for many. Fried catfish. Christmas Eve dinner was a Southern tradition children counted down to every year, circling the kitchen the moment they heard oil popping in the pan. Mothers dredged the fillets in seasoned cornmeal, shaking off the excess before laying them gently in hot oil that smelled like celebration. The fish crisped quickly, turning golden and fragrant, filling the house with a scent so comforting it felt like part of the season itself. Children crowded around the table grabbing for the crispiest pieces, blowing on their fingers when the fish was still too hot to touch but refusing to wait. It was a meal that felt festive without needing many ingredients, one that tasted like Southern pride and holiday joy served with laughter. Fried catfish tasted like tradition celebration and a Christmas Eve that always felt special, the kind of night that lived in memory long after childhood ended. Peach cobbler with thick crust was the bubbling holiday dessert that made every child hover near the oven with wide eyes and impatient feet, drawn in by the sweet smell before they even saw the dish. Mothers poured sweet peaches, fresh canned or frozen, into baking dishes and covered them with a thick buttery crust that baked into golden, flaky perfection. As it cooked, the syrup bubbled up around the edges, sending a warm, fruity smell through the whole house that felt like Christmas arriving early. When the cobbler came out, children begged for a scoop while it was still steaming, hoping for the corner piece where the crust was crispest. Families gathered around with bowls that warmed their hands, savoring each sweet bite. Peach cobbler tasted like sweetness, comfort, and Christmas joy wrapped in pastry, a dessert that defined holiday evenings. Yeast rolls brushed with butter were the soft, cloud-like bread children could never stop reaching for during Christmas dinner. Mothers kneaded the dough patiently, letting it rise under warm towels until it doubled in size, checking it gently with fingers that knew the exact feel of readiness. When the rolls baked, they puffed into golden pillows that glistened as melted butter brushed across their tops, filling the air with warmth. They were perfect for sopping up gravy pairing with ham or eating warm and plain straight from the pan while steam curled upward. Children always tried to sneak one before dinner even began, unable to resist. Yeast rolls tasted like softness, warmth, and the kind of love that came from hands that cooked all day to make Christmas feel whole. Turkey neck gravy over rice was the thrifty holiday dish that tasted richer than anything store-bought, proving that skill mattered more than ingredients. Mothers simmered turkey necks with onions, celery, and spices until the broth turned deep and flavorful, stirring occasionally while the aroma drifted through the house. Once the meat softened, they thickened the broth into gravy and poured it generously over rice, creating a meal that felt comforting and complete even on a tight budget. Children scraped their plates clean, knowing this was one of those dishes that only appeared on special days. The gravy seeped into every grain of rice, turning something simple into something layered and rich. Turkey neck gravy tasted like resourcefulness, richness, and holiday care made from simple ingredients handled with love. Baked chicken and dressing casserole was the one-pan miracle that fed big families without stretching the budget too far, especially on holidays when everyone showed up hungry. Mothers layered shredded chicken with cornbread dressing broth, onions, celery, and spices, baking it until everything fused into a savory, comforting dish that smelled like home. The top browned just enough while the inside stayed moist, tender, and full of holiday flavor that felt like generations blending together. Children lined up with plates ready, knowing this was the kind of dish that disappeared fast because every scoop felt like a full meal. It was the ultimate sharing dish, one that made room for everyone at the table. Baked chicken and dressing tasted like togetherness, tradition, and a Christmas table full of love that did not depend on extravagance. Red velvet cake with cream cheese frosting was the Christmas showstopper, the dessert that made children gasp when it landed on the table because no other cake looked quite like it. The cake's deep red crumb contrasted beautifully with the thick, tangy white frosting spread across every layer with deliberate care. Mothers made it slowly and proudly, knowing it signaled a special occasion and that every slice would bring wide smiles. The flavor was rich, smooth, and softly cocoa-kissed, the kind of taste that stayed with you long after the plate was empty. It was usually saved for the very end of the day, when everyone settled down for one last bite of sweetness. Red velvet cake tasted like joy, pride, and a Southern Christmas done right, a dessert that felt like celebration in every layer. Stewed cabbage with onions and pepper was the kind of Christmas side dish that proved you did not need expensive ingredients to make something delicious and comforting. Black mothers in the 1960s knew how to coax flavor out of the simplest vegetables, turning cabbage into a dish that warmed the whole table. They sliced the cabbage into soft ribbons, letting it fall into a pot with onions, a little oil, and black pepper that bloomed the moment it touched the heat. As it simmered, The cabbage softened slowly, absorbing every bit of flavor until the whole pot smelled humble and familiar in the best way. Children might not have rushed toward cabbage the way they rushed toward pie or ham, but they always scooped some onto their plates because mothers seasoned it so well. Stewed cabbage was tender, savory, and soothing, the kind of dish you paired with anything else on the plate. It was a reminder that holiday food did not need to be fancy to carry meaning. It stretched far, fed many, and tasted like home cooking shaped by patience and love. Even families with tight budgets could rely on this dish to fill the table without sacrifice. Years later, people who grew up with it remember the gentle aroma, the way steam rose from the pot, and the feeling of being cared for by hands that always made the most of what they had. Stewed cabbage with onions and pepper tasted like comfort, resourcefulness, and the quiet heart of Christmas dinner. Brown butter green beans were the kind of Christmas side dish that brought elegance to the table without costing more than a handful of coins. Black mothers in the 1960s knew how to elevate simple vegetables with nothing but time, seasoning, and a patient hand at the skillet. They simmered the beans until they softened, then added butter to the pan, letting it melt and deepen into a nutty brown that scented the entire kitchen. That butter clung to every bean, turning something plain into something rich and irresistible. Children might not have known why these beans tasted different, but they knew they loved them. The dish balanced softness and flavor, proving that holiday meals were not about money, but about intention and skill. Brown butter green beans often sat beside ham, chicken, dressing, or whatever the family could afford that year, acting as a steady, comforting anchor to the plate. Mothers appreciated how far the dish could stretch, filling bowls without straining the pantry. Families gathered around the table, taking generous spoonfuls because the flavor tasted deeper than a simple vegetable had any right to taste. Even long after childhood ended, people remembered the nuttiness, the shine, and the warmth that rose from the pan on Christmas afternoon. Brown butter green beans tasted like thrift turned into luxury, one careful stir at a time. Salmon croquettes with lemon were the Christmas treat families made when fresh fish was far too expensive, proving once again that Black mothers in the 1960s could create celebration from whatever they had. Canned salmon was cheap, dependable, and always waiting in the cupboard for special meals. Mothers mixed it with breadcrumbs, onions, eggs, and seasoning, shaping patties that sizzled the moment they hit the hot skillet. The outside crisped into a golden shell while the inside stayed tender, savory, and full of comforting flavor. A squeeze of lemon over the top made the croquettes taste bright and festive, like something far fancier than their ingredients suggested. Children begged for them as soon as the smell filled the house, crowding the kitchen doorway and asking how much longer until they were ready. These croquettes felt like a gift, especially when paired with rice, grits, greens, or dressing. Mothers loved the dish because it stretched a single can into enough patties for several children, filling stomachs without draining the holiday budget. Every bite tasted like care seasoned with creativity. Years later, adults remembered the crisp edges, the steam rising from the center, and the little splash of lemon that made the flavors sing. Salmon croquettes with lemon tasted like celebration crafted from skill, not cost. Buttermilk pound cake was the Christmas dessert that greeted guests before they even stepped fully inside the house, because its warm, sweet smell drifted through every room. Mothers mixed flour, sugar, eggs, butter, and buttermilk with practiced rhythm, creating a batter so thick it barely moved when stirred. The cake baked slowly in a heavy pan, rising into a dense, tender loaf with a golden crust that cracked just slightly along the top. Children hovered near the oven, asking if it was ready yet, even though they knew pound cake took patience. When it finally cooled enough to slice, mothers cut each piece thin so everyone could have a share. The flavor was rich and comforting, sweet without being overwhelming, with the tang of buttermilk giving it a depth that lingered on the tongue. Pound cake was never just dessert, it was a gesture of welcome, love, and holiday generosity. It appeared at Christmas dinners, church gatherings, and visits from neighbors who stopped by to bring good wishes. Mothers knew how long the cake stayed soft, and it often lasted several days, though it rarely survived that long in a house full of children. Even after years passed, people remembered the dense crumb, the warm slices, and the feeling of being handed a piece fresh from the pan. Buttermilk pound cake tasted like Christmas hospitality baked into every bite. Sweet rice pudding with raisins was the dessert that turned a handful of leftover rice into something that felt like a gift at the Christmas table. Mothers heated the rice slowly with milk, sugar, butter, and warm spices until it thickened into a creamy, fragrant pot that sent comfort drifting through the kitchen. Raisins, often saved for holidays, were stirred in last, plumping into soft little bursts of sweetness. Children loved watching them swell and surface, treating each spoonful like a treasure hunt. The pudding tasted warm, gentle, and deeply soothing, the kind of dessert you ate slowly just to make the moment last. For families with little money, this dish proved that creativity mattered more than ingredients. Mothers knew it filled hungry stomachs and warmed cold winter mornings, stretching what they had into something memorable. It was served in bowls passed around the table, steaming and sweet, with cinnamon dusted lightly over the top when the budget allowed. Everyone from the youngest child to the oldest grandparent took comfort in its familiar taste. Long after the holidays, people remembered how rice pudding made the house smell like cinnamon and hope. Sweet rice pudding with raisins tasted like warmth, resourcefulness, and Christmas sweetness created from almost nothing. Chicken and dumplings holiday pot was the dish that wrapped Christmas in warmth, especially in homes where money was tight and hearts were full. Mothers simmered chicken pieces, sometimes wings, backs, or necks, in a large pot with onions and celery until the broth grew rich and fragrant. Then came the dumplings, soft dough dropped by spoonful into the bubbling pot. They puffed as they cooked, soaking up all the flavor until each dumpling tasted buttery, tender, and soothing. Children loved lifting the lid to watch the dumplings dance in the steam, begging for the first bowl even when they knew it needed more time. When served, the dish felt like a warm blanket in food form, thick, hearty, and perfect for winter nights. Mothers made chicken and dumplings because it stretched modest ingredients into enough to feed a crowd, leaving no one hungry. Each spoonful tasted like comfort built through slow cooking and patient hands. Even years later, adults remembered the steam fogging the windows, the sound of the bubbling pot, and the quiet moment when the first dumpling broke open on their tongue. Chicken and dumplings tasted like holiday love large enough to fill a room. Cranberry orange gelatin mold was the festive centerpiece that sparkled under holiday lights, sitting proudly in its familiar metal mold on Christmas tables throughout the 1960s. Mothers mixed cranberry sauce, orange zest, sugar, and gelatin, pouring the mixture into molds shaped like rings, wreaths, or holiday designs. When it chilled overnight, it emerged glossy and jewel-toned, firm enough to hold its shape, but soft enough to melt on the tongue. Children loved the wobble, tapping the plate lightly just to see it jiggle before taking a bite. The flavor balanced tart cranberry with bright citrus, making it refreshing alongside heavier holiday dishes. Mothers appreciated that it required few ingredients, stretched far, and looked impressive without costing much. It added color to plates filled with greens, dressing, and meats, offering a sweet note between savory bites. This dish represented the creativity and pride mothers brought to holiday meals, transforming canned and simple ingredients into something festive and memorable. Even decades later, people remembered the cool sweetness and the joy of unmolding it just right. Cranberry orange gelatin mold tasted like holiday sparkles shaped by steady hands. Molasses ginger cookies were the soft spiced treats Black families baked days before Christmas because they stayed tender and flavorful no matter how long they rested. Mothers mixed molasses, sugar, flour, ginger, and warm spices into a dough that filled the kitchen with a scent children never forgot. Rolled into balls and dusted with sugar, the cookies cracked as they baked, forming little ridges that hinted at the softness inside. Children reached for them the moment they cooled, savoring the chewy centers and deep molasses flavor. These cookies tasted warm and comforting, like winter spices wrapped in sweetness. Mothers loved them because they were inexpensive, made in large batches, and perfect for sharing with neighbors or packing into tins for relatives. Long after the holiday passed, families still found a few cookies tucked into jars, just as fresh as the day they were made. Molasses ginger cookies tasted like patience, spice, and the slow sweetness of Christmas tradition. Christmas morning grits with butter and sugar were the bowl children asked for, even before racing to open presents. Mothers cooked the grits low and slow, stirring them until the mixture thickened into something warm, smooth, and comforting. A spoonful of butter melted across the top, followed by just enough sugar to make the bowl taste sweet without overwhelming the grain. Children loved holding the warm bowl in their hands, steam rising into sleepy faces as excitement buzzed around them. This breakfast grounded the morning in warmth and love before the chaos of wrapping paper and gifts. It was simple, inexpensive, and dependable. The kind of dish that reassured mothers that everyone began the day nourished. Even as adults, people remembered the quiet moment before celebration, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of sweet grits. Christmas morning grits tasted like comfort and tradition waiting beneath the tree. Holiday fruit cocktail cake was the thrifty dessert that surprised everyone by tasting far better than its modest ingredients suggested. Mothers mixed boxed cake batter with a can of fruit cocktail, juice and all, creating a batter that baked into a moist, tender cake dotted with cherries and soft fruit pieces. As it cooked, the top formed a sugary crust that crackled slightly when cut. Children loved the bright pops of color inside each slice and the sweetness that came from fruit baked in syrup. This cake was inexpensive, reliable, and perfect for feeding a crowd on Christmas Day. It often appeared alongside pies, puddings, and cobblers, holding its own with simple charm. Mothers appreciated that it used pantry ingredients and required very little work during an already busy holiday. Even years later, adults remembered the warm slices and the unexpected delight of fruit in every bite. Holiday fruit cocktail cake tasted like thrift turned into celebration. Stewed apples over grits was the quiet morning comfort many families turned to when fresh fruit was limited, but preserved apples were always within reach. Grandparents would slice apples thin and let them simmer with sugar or syrup until they softened into a fragrant golden mixture that tasted like fall in every season. Meanwhile, a pot of grits bubbled on the stove, thickening slowly as it absorbed the heat. When the stewed apples were spooned over the top, the contrast of creamy grits and sweet fruit felt like a small luxury. It was warm, filling, and gentle, the kind of breakfast that soothed the stomach and the spirit. Some families added cinnamon, others added butter, but most kept it simple because the apples were already sweet enough. This dish was a reminder of home orchards, backyard trees, and jars of preserves lined up on pantry shelves. It tasted like patience and tradition, like the kind of mornings where time moved slower. Even today, stewed apples over grits feels like a forgotten treasure from a quieter time. Salmon croquettes with grits turned pantry staples into a breakfast feast that felt both luxurious and familiar across African American communities of the 1970s. Canned salmon was flaked into a bowl with onions, breadcrumbs, and a little seasoning, then shaped into neat patties ready for the skillet. As they fried, the croquettes developed a crisp golden crust while staying moist inside, their aroma mingling with the gentle steam of creamy stone-ground grits bubbling nearby. This pairing brought together the coastal traditions of the South and the practicality of modern kitchens, where canned fish kept well and stretched to feed a family. Some cooks added a squeeze of lemon or a pinch of cayenne for extra brightness and heat, while others folded in fresh herbs from backyard gardens. Served with a side of sliced tomatoes or greens, salmon croquettes with grits delivered protein, comfort, and a taste of heritage, showing how everyday ingredients could be elevated into a soulful breakfast worth savoring. Lard-fried corn pones were the kind of breakfast that stuck to your ribs and carried you through long hours of work or school. These dense corn patties were mixed from cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt before being fried golden in sizzling lard. The flavor was simple but deeply satisfying, with the crisp edges giving way to a soft interior that felt hearty in every bite. For families with little to spare, corn pones were portable and cheap, making them an everyday staple as well as a meal to take out into the fields. Children often carried them wrapped in cloth, while adults relied on them with strong coffee to start their mornings. They were versatile too, eaten plain, dipped in molasses, or even crumbled into buttermilk for a different kind of breakfast. Lard-fried corn pones were never fancy, but they were dependable, and that made them unforgettable. They represented resourcefulness and strength, the kind of food that reflected both necessity and comfort in kitchens where nothing went to waste. Turnip root hash was a thrifty answer to shortages, using diced turnip roots fried much like potatoes, crisped in fat and seasoned with salt. Potatoes were not always available, but turnips grew easily in southern soil, making them a dependable substitute. Housewives peeled and chopped the roots, cooking them in cast-iron skillets with bacon grease or drippings until golden. The result was hearty, slightly sweet and sustaining, often served with greens or beans to make a complete meal. Children learned to love the taste, even if it was not quite the same as potatoes. The dish symbolized resourcefulness, proving that survival depended on making use of what the land offered. In many homes, turnip root hash was a regular presence, showing up on breakfast, lunch, or supper tables depending on what else was available. Though largely forgotten now, it was once a practical and nourishing staple. Another example of how Southern families endured under the constraints of poverty and segregation. Coffee milk for kids was one of those small morning rituals that made children feel grown, even though the drink was mostly warm milk with only a tiny splash of coffee. Parents and grandparents mixed it carefully, just enough coffee to tint the milk a light tan and add the faintest whisper of that roasted smell adults relied on to start their day. It was soothing, warm, and familiar. The kind of drink that made sleepy children perk up before school without giving them the full strength of adult coffee. Many African American households use this as a way to include children in the morning rhythm, letting them feel part of the adult world while still keeping things gentle. The taste was mild and slightly sweet, especially when a bit of sugar was added, and it had a comforting creaminess that stuck with you long after the cup was empty. The mornings felt quieter back then, slower, filled with the soft sounds of spoons stirring and radios humming low in the background. Coffee milk was not just a drink, it was a moment, a shared start to the day that made you feel loved and included. Even now, the memory of that warm cup brings people back to kitchens filled with steam, conversation, and the steady comfort of family. Buttered hominy with bacon brought a smoky, buttery aroma to African American breakfast tables of the 1970s, turning a humble grain into something rich and satisfying. White hominy kernels were simmered until tender, then sautéed in a heavy skillet with generous pats of butter. Crumbled strips of crisp bacon were folded in at the end, their savory fat blending with the buttery corn for layers of flavor. Some cooks added a sprinkle of black pepper or a pinch of red pepper flakes to deepen the taste, while others stirred in chopped green onions for brightness. Served alongside scrambled eggs or spooned over fresh cornbread, it offered hearty comfort that stuck with you through the morning. Buttered hominy with bacon celebrated both farm tradition and kitchen creativity, honoring a food once central to Native American diets and embraced by Southern cooks. Each bite carried the essence of smoky bacon and sweet corn, proving that simple, affordable ingredients could create a breakfast that felt luxurious without being complicated or costly. Fried chicken neck with biscuits was another way families made use of overlooked cuts of poultry. Necks were cheap, flavorful, and could be fried crisp, then served alongside fresh biscuits for a sustaining breakfast. The meat was small but savory, and paired with biscuits, it created a meal that felt hearty despite its thrift. Families appreciated it because it ensured that no part of the bird was wasted, stretching poultry into multiple meals. Children remembered picking the meat from the bones, while adults valued the fat and flavor that carried into the biscuits. Fried chicken neck with biscuits was more than just food. It was an expression of resourcefulness. It provided both protein and comfort, fueling families for demanding days of work or marches. This dish symbolized resilience, showing how households turned scraps into sustenance without losing pride. Fried chicken neck with biscuits was a taste of perseverance, remembered as one of the breakfasts that carried people through struggle. Though store-bought jams eventually replaced it, Scuppernong grape jelly was once a staple of resilience, born from the vines that held strong through Jim Crow's hardest years. Souse, also known as head cheese, was a jellied meat dish made from boiling down pig parts no one else wanted, from feet to snouts. Housewives simmered these cuts until the collagen broke down into a gelatin-like broth, then cooled it until it set into a firm, sliceable loaf. Vinegar and spices were added to mask the intensity, giving the dish a tangy edge. Families served it cold, often with bread or crackers, stretching scraps into something that resembled deli meat when real cuts were out of reach. Children rarely enjoyed the texture, but adults valued how far it could be stretched. Souse carried a sense of thrift, reflecting the deep-rooted tradition of wasting nothing, especially in poor communities where meat was scarce. Though unusual by today's standards, it once stood as a resourceful solution to hunger. Souse was not fancy, but it was survival food, a dish that carried families through the difficult years of the Jim Crow South by making scraps into sustenance. Egg and rice bowls were one of those fast, dependable breakfasts grandparents made without thinking, because the ingredients were always there and the result was always good. A pot of rice from last night could be rewarmed with a pat of butter, turning it soft and fragrant again. Then came the egg, fried or scrambled, laid gently over the top like a finishing touch. Only older hands knew how to time perfectly. The yolk soaked into the rice or the scrambled bits mixed through, creating a bowl that tasted warm, mild, and deeply comforting. It was cheap, quick, and endlessly reliable, the kind of breakfast that made mornings feel steady. Families loved it because nothing went to waste, because rice could stretch farther than any box of cereal ever could. Egg and rice bowls tasted like routine, like care, like the kind of quiet morning love that came before the sun was fully up. Brown sugar sweet grits offered a playful twist on the classic savory staple, transforming stone-ground corn into a kid-friendly morning treat. Grits were cooked slowly in milk or water until creamy, then stirred with butter and a generous spoonful of dark brown sugar. The sugar melted into the hot grains, creating a caramel-like sweetness that balanced the subtle corn flavor. Families sometimes added raisins, sliced bananas, or a sprinkle of cinnamon for extra indulgence, while others enjoyed the simple pairing of butter and sugar alone. This sweet version of grits became popular in households where children preferred a hint of dessert for breakfast, yet adults appreciated its nourishing heartiness. Brown sugar sweet grits demonstrated how one ingredient could shift from savory to sweet with a few thoughtful touches, proving that a Southern classic could adapt to changing tastes while staying rooted in tradition and comfort. Each steaming bowl brought smiles to the table and warmth that lingered long after the meal. Cold cornbread and milk was often called the poor man's cereal, but it was more than a label, it was a lifeline. Day-old cornbread, often too dry to eat on its own, was crumbled into bowls and covered with milk or buttermilk, creating a filling meal that could be eaten quickly before school or work. For children, it was breakfast. For adults, it was sometimes supper, proving its versatility. It carried a tangy, comforting flavor that became familiar in many Southern households. What made it special was not the taste alone, but the reminder that nothing was wasted, not even stale bread. In communities with little to spare, this dish represented survival and practicality. Cold cornbread and milk was part of the rhythm of daily life, a dish that carried generations through hard times and into mornings of determination. Even with its simplicity, it gave people what they needed to keep going during days that demanded courage and endurance. Fig preserves were a treasured sweet, made by simmering backyard figs with sugar into a thick, syrupy spread. Families valued figs because the trees grew easily, producing fruit that could be harvested by hand and saved for months through careful preserving. Housewives filled jars with the rich preserves, setting them aside for winter when fresh fruit was rare. Children loved the sticky sweetness spread on biscuits, pancakes, or cornbread, turning an ordinary meal into something special. Fig preserves also carried cultural weight, tied to family gardens and shared recipes passed down over generations. The process of preserving figs was time-consuming but worthwhile. ensuring nothing went to waste. They became a symbol of patience, love, and continuity in households that relied on what they could grow themselves. Though jars of fig jam are easier to find in stores now, the homemade preserves of the Jim Crow South remain unmatched, representing both survival and the sweetness families created in the face of hardship. If one of these Christmas meals brought back even a small memory, share it in the comments, tap like to keep the stories alive, and subscribe so you never miss the next taste of home.